You're welcome here regardless of who you love, who you vote for, the regrets that burden you, or the mistakes you have made. In this safe community, we support each other in the sacred task of becoming, celebrate the transcending mystery of life, and rely on the transforming power of love. Here, we revere the words of the great teachers such as Jesus, the Buddha, and Confucius. It is, however, the task of every youth to be their own Buddha, their own Jesus, their own Confucius. It is a cornerstone of our religion that each of us is the author of their own life experience, and through the practice of a compassionate mind, can heal our bodies, our minds, our spirits, and our planet. It is our work as a community to walk with each other along the spiritual pathways that lead towards happiness, compassion, and life fully lived. And while we are a safe harbor where there is solace and healing, we're also a launching pad in which we are propelled into the tumult of life to live courageously, justly, and lovingly. In this sacred place, we create the structures that lift up the downtrodden, set the captives free, and heal the brokenhearted. Here we have learned that to be fully human is to be fully divine, and that with a little help from our friends, we can each tell our own unique stories.
I've been very worried because my video isn't working. I was worried that my audio would do the same. For our social justice corner, I'm just going to read a letter from Mary Jo Schnell, the executive director of the Out Center. And the Out Center is one of the social justice agencies that we help support with our donations. So I'll start right now with Happy New Year to you and yours, and thank you for making the Out Center possible. As the Out Center brings a close to 20-year anniversary, we reflect on our amazing achievements of one-of-a-kind organization in Southwest Michigan. Since its inception, we have worked tirelessly to respond to the needs of our community and bring equity and dignity to LGBTQ plus people and allies in our three-county service area. In addition to more than 6,000 people who've received direct support from Out Center over the past 20 years. More than 15,000 people have benefited from our work with area school districts, faith communities, business and corporations, municipalities, and nonprofit organizations. Our organization has grown from a volunteer-led initiative to two full-time, two part-time professional staff, along with two contractor positions, and has an engaged board of directors, and we anticipate adding a third full-time position this year. Over the years, our initiatives have grown from community-wide conferences with faith communities and area schools to multi-year United Way funded projects such as LGBTQ plus Safe School Collaborative. This initiative continues to provide professional development workshops to our school staff, guidance to our school leaderships, as well as presenting to community-wide in intermediate school districts. As advocates of and subject matter experts, we partner with more than 24 school districts to provide LGBTQ plus students with the support they need, along with school-wide equity-focused life-saving policies. Our most recent initiative, the LGBTQ plus Competent Healthcare Project, has already made great strides partnering with the healthcare providers across our region and earned Out Center Southwest Michigan, the United Way Southwest Michigan inaugural Excellence in Impact Award. Additionally, we would be remiss not to mention the tremendous work that most folks don't see. Our work with our peer LGBTQ plus community centers and statewide advocacy groups. This amazing collaborative effort has now brought tens of thousands of dollars into Berrien, Cass, and Van Buren County through line items to address LGBTQ plus equitable healthcare in the state's budget. As we look forward, plans for 2024 are already in place to build momentum moving forward. In past election cycles, Out Center has polled and published area candidate responses on topics critical to our community, educated the broader community about candidate positions and policies, and participated in statewide campaigns. In 2022, we participated in Equity Michigan's Hate Won't Win campaign, the largest in the state's history. Their leadership and guidance with our statewide collaboration of centers and other LGBTQ plus groups resulted in progressive Michigan legislature that the likes we have not seen in 40 years. The legislature has since amended the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, passed a ban on conversion therapy, and now is working on several pro-LGBTQ plus pieces of legislation. Change and equity are not out of our reach. In this election year, we will continue to help bring residents to help educate residents about the positions, policies of candidates across Berrien County, Cass County, Van Buren counties, and continue to collaborate with important coalitions doing similar work. We know we can't do this work alone. Please support us in 2024 to ensure that hashtag hate won't win in Southwest Michigan. With gratitude, Mary Jo Schnell. And as someone who works volunteer with the Out Center, there's a lot of things, a lot of changes this year, a lot of things going forward, and Out Center can always use our support and is very appreciative for the support that we do give.
This appeared on the New York Times op-ed page years ago. The winter night is as long as the summer day. But if there is snow on the ground, it isn't 14 hours or more of darkness. With the moon, it can be as bright as early twilight. And even without the moon, it has enough reflected star glow to create a special world quite apart from the world of daylight. Moonlight casts ghostly shadows on the snow. It doubles every tree. One reaching for the stars, the other prone on the snow. It creates a new house beside your own, complete with roof and chimneys, so that you must walk through this shadow house to reach the moonlight. It blocks country roads with drifts of shadow that don't even delay the icy breath of midnight. But without a moon, the stars create a snow-lit magic of their own. The light now radiates from the snow itself, upward from the snow, not downward from the moon. It doesn't gleam as moonlight does. It glows. It casts no shadows. The trees have no ghost companions. They stand alone in the soft glow, pointing toward Perseus the champion and Auriga the charioteer. The road is an ill-defined lane between fields of flat star glow and pastures where moonlight shadow ponds have vanished. Pastures smooth as frosting on a cake, frosted and glinting with midwinter starlight.
Today, we not only light the chalice in our homes, but in our hearts to make an effort to show the light. May we be conscious of our light and use it to brighten the lives around us while also shining the light inwards on our own selves and being.
Now it's time for our story for all ages, and it really is for all ages today. So when I call someone to raise their hand, if anybody has done what I asked, please just raise their hand. How many people here have seen the movie Barbie? How many people here have seen the movie Barbie? No, the kids have that. Well, I've seen it, and does anyone who's seen it remember the scene in the movie when they try to put Barbie back in the box? Remember that one? They try to, the corporate executives from Mattel, not the real Mattel, try to put Barbie back in the box, but Barbie won't go in the box. And I thought that was a lovely metaphor for becoming an adult, because we all, each of us has from society gets a box. In fact, right now we're actually helping the little ones build some boxes for themselves. But so society creates a box for us. But usually the box doesn't fit us very well, and that was the case with Barbie. They wanted Barbie to be someone that was nice and safe and pliable and in a box, but Barbie didn't want to be that way. Barbie wanted to be a full human being, and basically, along somewhere about the time a person is a teenager, and maybe all the way through their 30s and even 40s, and maybe even longer than that, people have to learn how to make. We have to learn how to make our own boxes, our own social being. Now, back in this is for the more for the adults, for the kids, but I mentioned it before from this pulpit, but I'll mention it again. The philosopher Nietzsche had the idea that part of the stage of the development was killing the dragon that had every on which every scale of the dragon's body is written the word "thou shalt." So, feeling that that was an important stage, and the next stage of development for man, for human beings, is of course to be a child again, to be like a child, but not childish. At any rate, it's my considered opinion that the dragon, of course, is the box. And the dragon is what rides our backs. But while Nietzsche says that we should kill it, it's my opinion that we don't need to kill it. We just need to be aware of it and aware of the effects it has on our lives, and also to make it a useful animal, make it a draft animal, so to speak, to and help it carry, because it does carry part of the load of our being. But if we are too defined by our box, too defined by our dragon, we really aren't living life. We really never are able to bring ourselves fully into life. So,
am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well, Audrey.
I just want to preface this by saying that when Reverend Jim asked me to do this, when it comes to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I felt really intimidated, like even trying to comment on such a monumental quote of his, because his life was just so huge and impactful. And, I know a lot of people's lives are huge and impactful, but like, I don't know, it felt really big and intimidating and kind of overwhelming to even just consider what does this one quote of his or this, moment of his life mean for me. So it felt a little bit like, I don't know, kind of just rambly, my thoughts. So hopefully it won't come across that way. But the first thing I did when I was considering, this quote and its meaning to me, because I've seen it before, and probably a lot of you have seen it. I don't know if it's still up on a billboard in downtown St. Joe by the Dairy Corner, but it says, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And so the first thing I did was to dig into the context of this quote and find out like what speech or where it came from. And it's taken from a longer speech of his, a sermon that was given at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Alabama. Although I guess he gave variations of it in other locations during his years of speaking, but the sermon is titled Loving Your Enemies. And so about this quote specifically, I don't have much to say about it, except that I think he's absolutely right. One thing usually begets more of itself. So if you want something different, you need to do something different. But getting into the context surrounding it, as I was reading the sermon, and I can send everybody a link to where I found it if you want. It's really a very good message. And so I can send that to you if you want to read the full message. But there was more to it than just that quote that spoke to me as I was reading it. He goes on to say that all of us ought to love our enemies as instructed by Jesus, that it's really, really hard to do, but that it's necessary and it's the only way to achieve true peace on earth for all people, and therefore why we don't have universal peace yet. And that also there is a way to walk that command out to love your enemies in practice. And he kind of gives like a 3-step plan for how to do that in his sermon. And one of the first thing that he says actually was something that Tina said in her Chalice lighting words was that, you need to look inward first. You need to look at yourself. And so I thought that was cool, Tina, that you said that. But my biggest takeaway that I try to bring my attention back to when I feel myself getting angry politically or otherwise is this idea that we're not fighting against individual people, but we're fighting against systems of oppression and social structures and ways of thinking that generally value some people over others and exclude some people or groups from a community or make life harder for some people. And an example that I think about often is the concept of patriarchy, right? It's a word that kind of gets thrown around a lot in political and spiritual discussions, but it's also something that I think is easy to oversimplify and make it just about men versus women, male versus female, kind of a battle of the sexes kind of thing. Like this idea that men have been in charge of the world for most of human history, making decisions about women's lives and bodies, and women have built up this collective resentment over time because all men are bad and all women are the victims. And for some people, patriarchy has become synonymous with man hating. But the truth is, patriarchy is not a group of people. It's an idea. It's a power structure that puts some people's needs over others and attempts to take autonomy and power away from some people and give it to others. Similarly to how racism and colonialism work. And anyone, male or female, can buy into patriarchy as a good way to run the world. But those people are not my enemy. They're not our enemy. The idea of that structure that denies some people their basic needs and dignity is my enemy. So going back to Dr. King's quote from the beginning, that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can, and hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Kind of the main instruction is to focus on the good things that you do want in the world. Equality, for all people to have their basic needs met, for all people to be granted dignity. You can't overcome hate with hate or force with more force. And you can't overcome patriarchal thinking, for example, with patriarchy's tools like dominance. One thing from last week that Chokwe Pitchford said when he was here that I really loved, and it's something that Brandon and I talk about often, is that one of the greatest tools you can use to fight ignorance and dominance and closed-mindedness is listening to your enemy, air quotes, to the person who opposes you, and keeping an open mind to their thoughts and feelings. And in so doing, then we don't block each other out. We don't return darkness for darkness or hate for hate, but we meet darkness with light and hate with love and fear and dominance with listening and understanding. So oppose the structures, fight the structures, but don't throw the people out with the structures. Love the people, even those who adhere to the structures that you're fighting. That's all.
Okay.
All right. So, Audrey, I share a lot of your same feeling of making a comment on Martin Luther King's profound words. But since I was asked by Jim to do this, I'm going to begin with the full quote that I found in Strength to Love, a 1963 book that Martin Luther King wrote, which I think he used probably throughout his career and giving his sermons. So, returning hate for hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Hate multiplies hate, violence multiplies violence, and toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. So when Jesus says, love your enemies, he is setting forth an impasse in the modern world that we must love our enemies or else. The chain reaction of evil, hate begetting hate, wars producing wars, must be broken, or we should be plunged into the dark abyss of annihilation. The 5 years from 1963, when these words were first written, to 1968, when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, significantly shaped my thoughts and responses to the world I live in. The assassination of President Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963, Malcolm X on February 21st, 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King on April 4th, 1968, and Robert Kennedy on June 5th that same year left my 15-year-old self skeptical of the adult world I was soon to enter. These years of returning hate for hate, violence for violence, and a deepening darkness befalling our nation and world forced me to begin to look into all these issues in a more careful way. Decade after decade, wars, assassinations, and an ever-deepening darkness have continued unabated. There was a brief period when the Berlin Wall came down, the Warsaw Pact was dissolved, and the Soviet Union collapsed. It seemed, with a positive mental attitude, that the world with its social and national options could be viewed as a bright possibilities for our future. Instead, we are confronted with the stubborn facts that certain Americans with a world-dominating vision were still swiftly acting to implement an ever darker period that we and our families would live through. What is this light that drives out darkness, or this love that drives out hate? The initial answer found is the light of awareness. Awareness not only of the immediate sensory experience of the world, but the awareness gained from an informed big picture view arrived at through study and analysis of world events. The subsequent answer, that of love, which can drive out hate, is discovered by the light of awareness turned within. Through seeing the emotional and mental factors that encloud the light of awareness, and by calming the stream of thoughts and disturbing emotions, one gains an insight that we all share the desire to be happy and to be at peace together in this world. We see love as the answer to the unasked question, where is our humanity? Is it in might makes right? Is it in the profit motive, our self-interest? Or is it our concern for the happiness and welfare of others that our humanity and love finds the opportunity and field for its expressiveness? Erich Fromm says in his The Art of Loving, individual love cannot be attained without the capacity to love one's neighbor. Martin Luther King Jr. also reminds us that we need leaders not in love with money, but in love with justice, not in love with publicity, but with humanity. I'll end here with a quote from The Array of Virtues of Manjushri's Buddha Realm. At that moment, everyone was filled with love and altruism, and they regarded one another as parents. Thank you.
Now it's time for our sermon, and I feel compelled to begin this sermon with a bit of an apology. I set out to honor the life of Martin Luther King Jr. Unfortunately, my mind dragged me off in other directions. So today will not be honoring MLK so much as I will be speaking of the creative spirit that constantly knocks on the door of our psyches, calling us to be each in our own way a Martin Luther King Jr., or a Clara Barton, or a Susan B. Anthony, or even a Buddha or a Jesus. It is the bedrock of our humanist religion that we build our own lives out of the raw materials of the human spirit. Recently, Barry Kitterman gifted me with a book he has written. Barry is not here today, and I confess I didn't ask to use his book, but I'm sure he would. It is a compilation of fictional short stories that takes place in Ivanhoe, California, which is a real place. I did not know this, but I read on the dust cover of Barry's book that he is an award-winning novelist who has taught in exotic places like China, Belize, and Taiwan. One of Barry's stories that caught my imagination is the story of a middle-aged minister serving a church in Ivanhoe. The minister is clearly depressed and very dissatisfied with his life, even though he has a loving wife and a church full of people to serve. The story focuses on a young woman named Grace. Grace is not attractive. She did poorly in school. She speaks with a lisp, and she is very poor. So poor she cannot even afford shoes for her wedding ceremony. Consequently, she does not have a lot of romantic prospects. Further, Grace's mother died when Grace was 8, leaving Grace in the care of a domineering grandmother who sees life through a very dark lens. So when a young man, Orland, starts to court Grace, it seems like something of a miracle. A time is set for a wedding. Barry does a masterful job of describing the wedding preparations and the excruciating wait at the church for Orland, who ultimately does not show up. What Grace does not know is because the minister's life is so flat and uninteresting, he cannot see that the marriage of the young couple is a real opportunity for joy for both of them. In fact, he believes that they are condemned to a life of unhappiness and poverty. He meets the young man, Orland, in the churchyard. Now, no one to Grace turns him away. It was, of course, crushing for Grace, who does not know of the minister's betrayal. There is more to the story, but you will have to read it yourself. There will be a copy of the book in the church library, and I have it right here. It's very attractively packaged book, and all the stories in it are quite interesting and compelling. The point of the story for us is we often have times in our lives when we suffer from a kind of ennui. Life is flat even though we are doing well in our careers. We have money in the bank, the kids are doing well in school, and we have a spouse or family that genuinely cares for us. Yet, all the air has been let out of our tires. Our gas tanks are empty. Existence seems meaningless, and sometimes despair becomes a familiar companion. What is the remedy for this malady? It is my opinion that the reason life goes flat is because we fail to really answer the call of the spirit of life on our lives. Each of us is a unique expression of life. In each of us are innate creativity, and when I say innate creativity, that is, in my mind, very similar to love. In each of us, our innate creativity is calling us to heroic action, to be our own version of a Martin Luther King Jr. or a Jane Goodall. Life is calling us to put ourselves out there, to address the challenges of being, to take some risks. You all know what I mean. Everyone here has something knocking at their door, some element of the spirit that wants you to give it a voice. Now, it is good to have heroes like Martin Luther King Jr., or Florence Nightingale, but the real project is to have your own heroic life. To find sustaining joy in life, we must become our own heroes. Our humanist philosophy holds that to be fully human is to be fully divine, and that the whole energy of the universe are available to us to live fully and compassionately. Unfortunately, many of us have shunned these energies in order to maintain the illusion of safety. We ignore the call from within to take our place in the fight for righteousness, justice, environmental vitality, and love. We are timid to face the immensity of life. Interestingly, much of the difficulty modern people face in being heroic is rooted in the thought of the early 17th century French philosopher René Descartes. Descartes invented a philosophy that had become a world religion. Much of the way billions of people see the world is through the lens of Descartes' philosophy. Very few people have any idea who Descartes is, however, but we are thoroughly indoctrinated in our high schools and universities into his thought, which is called Cartesian dualism. Cartesian dualism holds that there are two qualities of being, spirit and matter. Matter is dead, inert stuff, and spirit is the stuff of the mind. Your body and the rest of the visible universe is dumb, inert matter, and your self-aware mind is your spirit. Since the spirit is only in human minds, all the rest of life is just dumb automata. Descartes is, for example, famous, or maybe infamous, for his experiments for vivisecting dogs, often cutting the still beating heart out of an unanesthetized dog as a demonstration for small audiences of his friends and colleagues that the pain animals experience is only the automatic response of dumb matter somehow organized into a dog. Cartesian dualism has evolved in the last 400 years so that the mind or spirit is now considered to be a byproduct of complexly arranged matter, such as the human brain, which is, according to Descartes, also dumb inert matter. In recent years, we have been expecting that some of our very complex machines will develop spirit, or what is now called conscious self-awareness. This has not happened. We are not even close. Though we have developed machines that can learn to ice skate, compose music, write law briefs and author not very good novels, spirit has not yet shown up. And by way of footnote, Cartesian dualism, as I mentioned, now known as materialistic materialism, or scientific materialism, has been very useful for dramatic advances in the sciences. Because of these advances, thinking of the universe as a complex machine made out of inert matter has become, as I mentioned earlier, religion of the masses. It is, however, very bad religion. It can take us only to despair. Who cares if I live 40 years longer because of an open heart surgery if my life means nothing? What can my life mean if I am a meat puppet, just cleverly arranged dumb material, and if the soul or the self, and along with it free will, are nothing but illusions? End of footnote. And by way of another footnote, don't let anyone tell you that religion is not taught in our public schools. It is. It is the religion of mechanistic materialism, and we are all of us indoctrinated. On the other hand, the science of quantum physics does not fit into the materialist model. It turns out that we really don't know what matter is at all. In fact, we have not discovered any actual stand on its own matter. All of what we call matter is composed of invisible electromagnetic fields. Further, according to quantum physics, the qualities of matter, such as color, taste, solidity, texture, odor, mass, and even existence in time and space, occur only within the human mind or the human spirit. The existence of the material world is entirely dependent on conscious observation. Nobel Prize winner Max Planck, for instance, postulated that the material world is derivative of consciousness. Niels Bohr, also a Nobel Prize winner, believes we do not merely observe the world, we are active participants in creating it. These kinds of statements from Bohr and Planck sound like madness to minds like ours, that have been indoctrinated in Cartesian dualism. Yet, for most of our history as a species, we have seen the world as dependent on spirit and not the other way around. Think, for instance, of the animism of most indigenous peoples before colonialism. For the Sioux of the North American Great Plains, for the Yanomami of the Amazon River Basin, for the Inuit in the frozen north, and for the Aranda on the Australian continent, all life was imbued with and originated in spirit. 700 years before the birth of Christ, it was reported in the Upanishads, it is everywhere, though we see it not. Just so, dear one, the spirit is everywhere, in all things, although we see it not. There is nothing that does not come from it. It is the truth. It is the self-supreme. And then here's the clincher. It is the self-supreme, and you are that. Now, if you interpret that passage as you, as a conscious-bearing being, are an active participant in the creation of the material and spiritual universe, you are right. How interesting that the ancient sages arrived at the conclusions 2.5 millennia before 20th century scientists like Bohr and Planck. 2,400 years ago, Plato, the first idealist philosopher in the West, said, "The material world we live in is a world of mere copies. We see only shadows of unchanging universal perfect ideas. Forms do not exist in space and time, but in another realm of their own. The objective material world does not exist in time and space. It exists only in the realm of ideas. The human mind, how strangely prescient of the discoveries of quantum physics." 2,000 years ago, Jesus said, "Before Abraham was, I am." You may recall, depending on the translation, Moses' burning bush identified itself as I am. Translated, that means I am not just a being, I am being itself. It seems likely, based on Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, that he thought all conscious-bearing beings are being itself. And this, of course, includes you and me. 800 years ago, Meister Eckhart said, you've heard this quote before, it's my favorite, "The eye by which I see God is the same as the eye by which God sees me." Translation, your true identity is God, and God's true identity is you, and every particle in the living universe to boot. 200 years ago, the German philosopher Immanuel Kant said, "Space and time exist in the world of senses only." Translation, there is no such thing as space and time outside of our minds. Instead, time is one of the ways the human mind, spirit, organizes and understands its perceptions. 150 years ago, Black Elk, the Ogallala Sioux said, "At the center of the universe Rawls Wankantaka, the Great Spirit. This center is really everywhere. It is within each of us. Translation, you are a creative center of the universe. Neuroscientist Donald Hoffman, recent winner of the Trollman Research Prize of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences and the Early Career Award of the American Psychological Association, postulates that objects do not exist independently of us perceiving them, and that all that really exists is conscious agents. Translation, you and I are conscious agents that bring the objective world into existence through the act of perception. We are the creator of our world. This brings us back to personal heroism. If life is feeling hollow and you occasionally fall into despair, perhaps you're not aware that according to science, philosophy, and religion, within you resides the creative powers of the universe, that you can make a difference, that you can be alive to your life, that you can be a hero for your life, that you can get your Martin Luther King Jr. on, or your Clara Barton on, or your Susan B. Anthony on. Except there really won't be any of them you're getting on. It is a sentient being that is being realized in you. It is your Jim Fuller, your Vicki Thomas, your Audrey Antosz-Flowers, your Beth LaFleur that you are getting on. And now let's take a moment to meditate before we continue.
I don't really have anything to read because I wanted to take in everything and put it in the chalice from today and see how that rose up. And what it feels to me like is community. And we've been listening to great works of great beings that we all have a lot of support from this community to bring our love and compassion and light out for others. And as we close the chalice here, we can take the light that we gained from being in community out to others and see how that manifests and where we need to look back again and see how we could make it our own flame bigger. Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. Amen. Very, very nice.